welcome to Access Sportsnet Lakers. I'm Allie. Clifton, joined by your Lakers reporter Mike Trudell, and from Lakers.com. It's been a while. We say hello to you, Joey Ramirez. How are you?
I'm great. Now that I see you guys, now that I see Mike Trudell, my day is going great.
Joey, you look great. I just want to get that off the start. The way the hair's flowing today.
Stop
excellent.
it. I'm going for an Indiana Jones kind of thing. I don't know if Allie's going to get that one, but...
Okay, we're going to get this edition. I'm so glad it's in the prompter of Access underway. Shout out to you, Joey. Welcome to the show.
That's fine.
Purple and gold have left Los Angeles for the NBA's bubble environment in Orlando. Prior to their departure, the team was hosting individual workouts at the practice facility in El Segundo. And during recent media interviews, the Lakers spoke about their title chances during the NBA's restart.
Actually, I think our chances are higher just because we are all rested and we're all ready to go. So, if anything, our chances got higher. And it's going to be about just who wants it more. I mean, everybody kind of had a decompression of the season, and obviously, with stuff going on. But it's about what team wants it more and which team can stay healthy.
It means a lot, and that's why I'm taking it so serious. Like I said, over this whole quarantine, I kind of been just preparing my mind and my body and just, get ready for this opportunity. Not many players have opportunities to win rings, and, I have a chance to do that in my third year and, kind of really make moves with my career going forward.
Obviously, the bubble and the rules and the things that we've read and seen aren't the most exciting thing to be looking forward to. But at this point, I think we're ready for it. If you're not ready, I don't know what to tell you, but at this point we're ready as we're possibly ever going to be in that type of atmosphere. But I think our team has an advantage because we have older guys guys that like to be themselves, stay at home, have families, and have done the partying. We don't need to be out in the streets or get antsy. A lot of guys have been through that lifestyle, so we're easily I think ahead of the pack when it comes to guys that can sit still and sit at home and not have to worry about being on the scene or doing a bunch of stuff outside of the house. So hopefully that helps us to our advantage.
So by the end of today, all 22 teams should be in Orlando now in the bubble. And of course, the Lakers still going with that same mindset of a title in the future, hopefully. So let's talk two storylines heading into the bubble. We're going to begin with you. Your top storyline is what?
I think it's Avery Bradley and how the Lakers replace him. Now, there's some good news here. In the regular season, Bradley missed 20 games. KCP started, and the Lakers went 17-3.
Great news.
Off the bench, you had guys like Alex Caruso step up, or Rondo in certain places, Quinn Cook in other places, and now, Allie, we have J.R. Smith, who I know you could tell us more about later in the show, plus Deion Waiters, who we saw shooting a couple of moments ago. So I do think that as much as they're going to miss his defensive intensity and some of the plays that they ran for him, certain curl plays, you just saw one of them right there, they do have some real good depth in that area, and there are other guys that know how to come in and complement LeBron and AD. But yet, to me, it's still that biggest question on the roster because losing a starter is a significant thing.
You're lucky if you are going to lose a guy like Avery Bradley that you do have guys like LeBron and AD leading the way, which kind of leads us into your first top storyline, Joey, when it comes to the Orlando bubble.
Yeah, for me, it's who is the top duo in the league. And that's going to be the biggest question, whether we're in a bubble, whether we're on actual arenas or whatever it is. And the answer here is LeBron and AD. I think that's kind of the commonplace answer. You have two elite players playing at the top of their games. LeBron, the best playmaker in the world. Anthony Davis, one of the best two-way talents in the world. But they have competition. They have Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, who are obviously coming to the bubble with them. You have Giannis Antetokounmpo, who is probably the odds-on favorite for MVP, and he's flanked by Chris Middleton, who is a great scorer from all three levels. And then there's some wild cards, James Harden, Russell Westbrook, but that's going to determine, in my opinion, who ends up coming out of Orlando with the title.
You mentioned Giannis, Joey, and I take it to you, Mike Trudell, because this leads you into your second point when you're thinking bigger picture, a team that the Lakers could ultimately face. The Milwaukee Bucks.
Yeah, and I like the way that Joey put that there. I would agree that LeBron and AD, to me, are the top duo. And that's why I do think about the Bucks, because as much as Joey mentioned, Middleton is a really good player. He's an all-star. He's not on that tier of an Anthony Davis or a Paul George to me. And we saw how good Milwaukee was last regular season, Allie, and then they flamed out in the postseason. They were even better this season, a historic plus 11 point differential. But I still need to see it. I mean, we saw what happened in this game when the Lakers, you saw on the Lakers home court when they beat the Bucks. Giannis still has that one weakness in his game where late in games, you can't always trust that he can go get you a bucket because of the shooting or the lack of shooting, and teams can kind of play off him. So Milwaukee, to me, still has to prove that, whereas I don't have those same questions about the Lakers or the Clippers, and a couple of other teams in the East, I think, can really push Milwaukee.
To your point, that was a huge red flag, especially with Giannis last season in the playoffs, as you mentioned, that outside shot. Where is it? Will he have it this time around? Joey, your final storyline, and I'm kind of anxious to see how this one unfolds as well. What about the home court advantage?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's just going to be weird, right? Like, this has never happened in the history of the NBA, really in the history of sports, where everybody's congregating together for these playoffs and the 8 games that precede it. We know in the NBA that home court advantage is a big deal. We know that that's what these teams are jockeying across 82 games the entire. And all of a sudden, the Lakers, who were number 1 in the West, don't really have that advantage, especially in a series against the Clippers, who are probably their biggest rivals in the West. That's going to be an interesting factor because the Clippers, we've all been to Clipper games, right? The Lakers fans always outnumber the Clippers fans. So what does that mean now that fan sort of advantage is gone for the Lakers, both across the playoffs and specifically when it comes to a potential LA matchup?
Joey, we're going to stick with you. We're going to take this one step further. We've got both storylines from the two of you. Let's talk power rankings. Your top 5 teams of the 22 that are now in the Orlando bubble. Give me all 5 of yours.
Yeah, right off the top, I'm going to go with the Lakers. It's like we talked about earlier. The Lakers, they have the best duo in the league, in my opinion. LeBron James, Anthony Davis. Right behind them, the Clippers, because they also have an elite duo in Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, but they also have some bench, maybe more than they have some bench depth, maybe more than the rest of these teams to kind of complement that. Milwaukee, the best player in the game by some accounts. I would say the Giannis Antetokounmpo and LeBron are neck and neck right now. Very different styles of playing. The defending champion Raptors, they are just so methodical, machine-like. They're so good. They aren't missing a beat without Kawhi, at least in the regular season. We'll see how that translates in the playoffs. But they have Pascal Siakam and an elite defense right now. And then the Boston Celtics, a team that have had some really tough matchups with the Lakers in recent history. And kind of like the Raptors or the Clippers, they have just a lot of talent across the board, including Jason Tatum, who we saw go off for a ton of points in LA just a couple months ago.
One team that I thought maybe we'd see on there would be the Denver Nuggets. But to your point prior, Joey, home court advantage, which really plays into their favor with the altitude, is no longer. So how different are your power rankings, Mike Trudell, top 5?
Not too different. I also gypped the Nuggets. They did not make my top 5, but I'm going to go 1, 2, 3.
Thanks.
Just like Joey, Lakers, Clippers, Bucks. And then let's focus on the back end here because I did consider both the Celtics and the Raptors, but to me, Houston just has a little bit more upside based on the way that they're going to play this postseason. The fact that Harden and Westbrook have been able to get rested, they were worn down, as was PJ Tucker, with what we saw because they play small, right? They don't even really play big inside. But I think that could just give some teams some problems. And then Philly, to me, is the team with the most upside. They just struggled in the regular season, especially on the road. They were amazing at home, but the talent, they have legit talent. Embiid, Simmons, both healthy now. Horford off the bench, they seem to have figured that out. So I wouldn't discount them yet. I think they could be right there with both Boston and Toronto to give Milwaukee some problems.
They're one of my favorite teams coming out of free agency. But we're going to dive into Philly, speaking of them, more so off the court. Did you guys see this? Joel Embiid headed to the bubble in a full hazmat suit, not playing around. Maybe this literally is his mindset of winning a title. He has to be completely top to bottom, suited and booted, safe.
There was a part of me that I was like, what kind of bubble could we create for LeBron and AD especially? It just literally keep them in one of those actual bubbles getting on the play. So I'm not mad about this at all, right? Anything you could do to decrease the chance of getting a virus, cool, go for it. I celebrate Joel Embiid doing that.
There are actually some people that are like, all right, if that's the length for which you have to go to, why even go? But I'm with you. I wanted one of those huge bubbles for LeBron and AD.
Seriously. I mean, Jared Dudley joked about it on a conference call the other day. He was like, we need to figure out a way to protect LeBron at all costs.
We're actually going to bring up something else Jared Dudley said. Stick around. Access rolls on after the break. But first, a throwback of LeBron dropping the hammer in front of to Access. Here's a look at the purple and gold schedule for their first 8 games in Orlando. They open up with the Clippers on July 30th. Then it's the Raptors, Jazz, Thunder, Rockets, Pacers, Nuggets in their finale August 13th against the Sacramento Kings. Remember, all 8 can be seen right here on Spectrum Sportsnet. Now, we heard some of the sounds of the week from the Lakers just a moment ago, so let's make the transition. One of which was AD saying he is 100% healthy. We cannot echo that enough, thanks to the hiatus. And the guys quite possibly could be some of the best news. Mike Trudell.
It is. This is something I think, Allie, if you sat down at the beginning of the season and said, all right, I promise you a fully healthy Lakers roster heading into the postseason, that would be the number one thing that you would want out of this season, even ahead of like the number 1 seed, which they are very likely to get, right? If they win 3 games, even if the Clippers go undefeated, they get the number 1 seed. But AD was the guy that, I want to say for the first time, but he really did a good job of playing through stuff this year. And which means that he had stuff that he was playing through, right? He had a shoulder, he had a knee contusion. Remember that big fall that he had in his back? That caused him to miss 5 games. So he only missed 8 games, but he was playing through some level of pain or another for much of the season. And when you have somebody of his talent level, of LeBron's talent level, you just want them to be healthy going into the bubble. They are, and that is the best news the Lakers could have.
Speaking of LeBron, from one superstar to the next, Joey, we knew that LeBron was having an MVP kind of season before the hiatus, and you just think about the amount of time he had, given the Lakers did not make the playoffs a season ago. How anxious are you to seeing how he will feel and look coming off this mini break?
Yeah, Allie, it's funny that you mention it that way, because I was thinking, wasn't it just last year that we were talking about LeBron's been to all these finals in a row and he's finally going to get a rest and he's finally going to get it off season. Let's see how he looks. And then he comes out and he looks amazing, right? He's leading the league in assists. He's got the Lakers first in the West by a comfortable margin. He is just playing prime LeBron James basketball. And now we're going to see him do it again. And, at the beginning of this hiatus, he kind of did temper expectations. He said, I was getting into rhythm, so this isn't necessarily a great thing for me. But that's not to say that LeBron won't turn this into something great for him. There were 19 games left in the season when everything shut down. Now there's only 8. You got to think that taking that mileage of those extra 11 games off of LeBron James can only be a good thing, especially with the way that he was peaking as the season went into hiatus.
One thing's for sure, when it comes to LeBron James, I think we just have to be ready for just about anything. But back to AD, because he has been full of quotes, not to mention telling the media he did not miss them at all. Good one by him. But another one was because of this hiatus, he feels that it has increased the Lakers' chances of winning a title. I'm all for that. What about you?
Yeah, the way that conversation went, AD was almost thinking about it in real time, because he got asked, like, what does it do for the fact that you guys were peaking at that right moment? We remember they beat the Clippers, they beat Milwaukee in succession, and really were playing the best basketball that they had played. And now all of this time, which essentially could break the rhythm that they had built up to that point. But I think as AD, to underscore what your last point was, Allie, he thinks that his being fully healthy, LeBron's being fully healthy, that right there then sets the rest of the roster to guys that know what their role is, which is to support those 2 players. And I think Frank Vogel has pulled the strings the right way all season in making sure that dynamic stays. And so while teams have a lot of questions going into Orlando, but the Lakers have 0 questions about the way that they're committed to each other, they're committed to the team, the way that they're playing basketball, and that is to support LeBron and AD. So I agree with him in that sense. Like, they're going to be stronger together because of the connection that they have built this season. That a lot of teams, they're going to have to try to regain that or build it that they haven't had it yet.
So one thing I've loved during this time is Jared Dudley has given us quite the amazing interviews, and one of which he just said that if you had any question as to whether or not LeBron was still on a mission, all you have to do is look at his beard. I don't know what that means, so you can digest that how you want, let that marinate. But is there any doubt that the mission that he possibly is on right now could be very dangerous? Joey Ramirez.
Yeah, well, just look at my beard, right? Like, this isn't the beard of a man on a mission, Allie. Like, there's a reason why I'm in Orlando and LeBron James is LeBron James. I think that if you just look at LeBron's body of work, though, right? 17 years of just excellence. He's built a resume unlike anybody else. He's been to 7 straight finals. He's won all these championships, 2 with the Heat, 1 with Cleveland. He is inarguably one of the greatest players of all time. And there's no way that the way that he motivates himself, he looks for challenges. And this might be the greatest challenge that the league has ever faced. And you heard that from Anthony Davis himself, from Frank Vogel, who said that the champion this year shouldn't have an asterisk. The champion should be celebrated for winning in such adverse conditions. And I think LeBron James is a guy who really does thrive in adverse conditions.
I mean, if you had any questions, Allie, about LeBron, just look at that video. and you sort of just look at the muscles. And like, if you have your shirt off in that context, it's for a reason, right? Like, that reminds me like me at my freshman year at college, like when I was still playing a sport, and just I could not find a shirt when I was walking around the hallway in the dorm. Like, that tells you something about what LeBron is up to.
I didn't even know he had his shirt off. I was just looking at the salt and pepper in the beard.
That looks good too.
Hence Jared Love.
But I'm saying the muscles, like, that's important.
I'm going to leave that to you. Moving on, a little update before we head to break. Chris Haynes of Yahoo has been sharing some of the social messages that players have decided to wear on their jerseys. You see Danny Green and Damian Lillard both going with how many more. Orlando Magic forward Aaron Gordon with freedom, Rudy Gobert with equality, and CJ McCollum of the Blazers, education. Some notable names that will be joining new teams in the bubble. The Clippers picked up veteran big man Joakim Noah. And the Nets made a couple moves on Wednesday night, adding a lifetime bucket getter, Jamal Crawford. He last played for the Suns in the 2018-19 season. And former Laker Michael Beasley. As for the Lakers, they added J.R. Smith to their roster for the restart in Orlando. And here's Frank Vogel with his early impressions of Swish.
It's clear that he's done a remarkable job of keeping himself in shape and staying ready. And I think this is really a great story. When you look at a guy who's potentially could be out of the league, there was a starter on a finals team, a couple years back, a champion. And, for him to have the perseverance to stay ready and give himself this opportunity, I think is to be commended. Watching him work out, hey, his nickname is Swish for a reason, right? He's a shot maker, right? A big-time shot maker. And like I said, he looks like he's in terrific physical condition. And like we've said all along, we think he's really going to help us.
I'm wondering what you think is going to be the challenge of trying to integrate with a new group, then also just how much reuniting with LeBron you think might help with that process.
Well, I mean, it's definitely going to be a challenge because obviously I haven't played with these guys. I haven't been around them as much. I obviously watched the games and been to a few games and seen them play, but it's different once you get out there knowing guys' tendencies, knowing guys going to cut or where they like to shoot the ball and stuff like that. So that's a little bit different. But for me, it's fortunate because I've never been the guy to really try to set up guys anyway. That's pretty much Bron, and it'll be AD's job. So for me, it'll be, get to the corners, space the floor, play defense as much as possible, and just try to stay out the way.
Joey, we haven't heard from you on this move by the Lakers, adding J.R. Smith. I'd imagine you're a fan of this.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested by it. Allie, you know JR more than I do, having covered Cleveland for those years where he and LeBron did play together. But with JR, I think it's kind of an interesting opportunity for him because we know that the rotation is going to be big in these 8 regular season games, and that's kind of where you expect to see JR, Dion Waiters, those type of guys try to make a case for themselves. But once playoffs come, I mean, we've seen some tight playoff rotations from teams that go deep because you want to be playing your top 8 or 9 guys when you get to conference finals, NBA finals type basketball. And the Lakers are fairly deep at the guard rotation. They have Danny Green, they have KCP, Alex Caruso, Rajon Rondo. So can JR break into there? I'm curious to see that. I think he's got an uphill battle.
You use the word interested, Joey, in what J.R. Smith can bring, and you might get it actually sooner than the 8 regular season games, because let's not forget, Mike Trudell, that there are 3 scrimmages that the Lakers will have before regular season, if you will, finishes up, where we could also see quite a bit of Dion Waiters as well.
No question. That is the perfect time for Frank Vogel to do a little experimenting to see what these guys can do and really just get everybody some NBA game conditioning. And you don't want to play LeBron and AD too much, obviously, in this kind of a setting, but you want to see how these guys look, and that has been the issue, right? Waiters hasn't played much this season. You guys just talked about J.R. Smith in his absence. Now, between those two, I wonder if Frank Vogel a little more partial to Waiters because of the Philadelphia connection. I mean, come on, Allie, you know he's a big Philly guy.
What do they call him, Philly cheese?
Philly cheese, yes, is Waiters' nickname. Vogel, I don't think, has a nickname. But you mentioned this while we were watching him talk. It's nice to just talk to Frank Vogel again. Nice to see him again as you take a look at the comparison between these two. But the bottom line is they can both go get a bucket.
Yeah.